The first thing I heard wasn't my mother's voice. It was the sound of my wine glass shattering against the hardwood floor. Someone gasped. A fork clattered onto a plate. Then my father stood up, pointed directly at me in front of nearly 80 guests, and said the words that split my life cleanly into a before and an after. "You're not my daughter anymore." The room fell silent. Even the pianist in the corner stopped playing. For a second I honestly thought he was joking. My dad loved dramatic speeches. Every birthday he stood up, embarrassed me with stories from childhood, made everyone laugh, then hugged me while my mom pretended to wipe away fake tears. This felt similar, until I looked at his face. There wasn't even a trace of humor. His jaw was clenched so tightly the muscles twitched beneath his skin. Beside him, my mother folded her napkin with perfect precision, as if she'd rehearsed this moment in front of a mirror. She wouldn't even look at me. "I'm serious," Dad said. "Pack your things tomorrow. You're finished with this family." My heart started pounding, so hard I could hear it in my ears. "What are you talking about?" He laughed once. "Cold. Short. The inheritance is gone." Another pause. "So are you." Nobody moved. My cousins stared at their plates. My aunt looked like she wanted to disappear beneath the tablecloth. Across the room, my younger brother Ethan avoided my eyes completely. He already knew. Somehow, he already knew. My name is Claire Morgan, 25 years old. Until that night, I believed I had an ordinary family. Not perfect, just ordinary. My dad owned a successful construction company outside Cincinnati. My mom volunteered at charity events and cared deeply about appearances. Everything in our house looked expensive enough to belong in a magazine. Everything except the relationships. Love in our family was conditional. You earned it. Good grades. Good manners. No public embarrassment. Smile in photographs. Never disagree with Dad in front of other people. I'd spent my whole life following those rules because I thought that's what daughters were supposed to do. Looking back, maybe I was trying harder than everyone else because somewhere deep inside, I always felt like I didn't completely belong. The birthday dinner had been my mother's idea. She rented the ballroom of an old historic hotel downtown. Crystal chandeliers, fresh white roses, gold-trimmed menus, a string quartet during cocktails. She planned everything down to the color of the candles. "It has to be elegant," she'd insisted. 25 only happens once. When I arrived that evening with my boyfriend Noah, something felt off. People smiled, but the smiles disappeared the second I looked away. Conversation stopped whenever I walked toward a group. Even my grandmother hugged me longer than usual, as if she were saying goodbye. I noticed another strange thing. 3 tables away sat a family I didn't recognize. There were 6 of them, an older couple, 2 women around my age, a teenage boy, and an elderly man with silver hair and kind eyes. They weren't dressed like random hotel guests. They were attending the party. Their place cards were on our guest tables, yet I'd never seen any of them before. The older woman kept looking at me. Not casually. She watched me the way mothers watch toddlers crossing busy streets. Protective, heartbroken. Every time our eyes met, she'd quickly look down. I leaned toward Noah. "Do you know who they are?" He followed my gaze. "No. They've been staring at me." He smiled. "Maybe you're the birthday girl." I laughed, but something in my stomach tightened. Dinner moved slowly. Speeches. Champagne. Photos. My mother corrected the photographer at least 12 times. "No, no." Claire stands beside me. "Move Ethan closer." Straighten the flowers. Everything had to look perfect. Then dessert arrived. A 5-tier cake covered in white sugar flowers. The lights dimmed. Everyone sang. I closed my eyes, made a wish, blew out the candles. And before the applause ended, Dad stood. That's when everything exploded. After he disowned me, people finally began whispering. "What happened? Did she steal something? Is she pregnant?" I heard she sued the company. Rumors spread faster than wildfire. None of them were true. "I don't understand," I said. Dad pulled an envelope from inside his jacket. He tossed it onto the table. Legal documents spilled across my birthday cake. "I've changed my will." My mother finally spoke. "Claire, we think it's best if you leave." "Think," as if this were a polite disagreement. "No," I whispered. "You don't get to do this without explaining why." Dad looked straight into my eyes. "Because you were never grateful." I blinked. What? You questioned every decision. I asked questions. You challenged me. I had opinions. You embarrassed this family. When? He slammed his fist onto the table. When you became impossible to control. Silence. Noah stepped beside me. Mr. Morgan, this isn't appropriate. Dad pointed toward the exit. You stay out of family business. Noah didn't move. I won't leave her. Dad's face darkened. Then both of you can go. Before I could answer, a chair scraped across the floor. Not behind me. 3 tables away. The older woman I'd noticed earlier had stood up. She looked terrified. The elderly silver-haired man grabbed her wrist gently. Not to stop her. To steady her. She was crying. Actually crying. Over me. I frowned. Who was she? Why did she look like hearing those words had broken her heart? She took one hesitant step toward us. Then another. My mother saw her. For the first time all evening, my mother's perfect composure cracked. Her face went completely white. Dad noticed too. His confidence disappeared for half a second. He barked across the ballroom. Sit down. Not to me. To the stranger. Everyone turned. The woman froze. The silver-haired man quietly stood beside her. His voice was calm. No. One word. Soft. But somehow louder than my father's shouting. Dad's expression changed from anger to fear. Real fear. I had never seen that before. What are you doing here? Dad demanded. The older man answered. We were invited. No, you weren't. He calmly reached into his jacket and produced an invitation card. My mother's handwriting. Her signature. Dad stared at it without speaking. Around us, confused guests exchanged looks. My aunt whispered something to my grandmother. Ethan suddenly left the room. Almost ran. The woman looked directly at me. Her voice broke. She tried again. I've waited 25 years. My entire body went cold. 25 years. Exactly my age. She took another careful step. I didn't come to ruin your birthday. She wiped tears from her cheeks. I came because I couldn't spend another birthday pretending you didn't exist. I looked from her to my parents. Neither of them denied knowing her. Neither of them looked surprised. Only terrified. What is she talking about? I asked. Nobody answered. The silence felt unbearable. Finally the silver-haired man spoke. Claire. Hearing my name from a complete stranger should have felt wrong. Instead, something about his voice felt oddly familiar. Gentle. Safe. Like a memory I couldn't quite reach. There are things, he said carefully, that should have been told to you a very long time ago. Dad exploded. Security. Several hotel employees hurried toward us. The old man didn't resist. He simply reached into his pocket, pulled out a worn leather wallet, opened it, removed a faded photograph. He looked at me one last time before handing it across the table. This belongs to you. Security took him by the arm. The crying woman reached toward me. Please. Then they were escorted toward the ballroom doors. The photograph remained in my trembling hands. I looked down. It showed a young woman lying in a hospital bed, holding a newborn baby. She was smiling through tears. Standing beside her was the same silver-haired man. And in the corner of the photograph, written in blue ink, were 4 words that stopped my heart. Welcome home, Claire. Not baby. Not our daughter. Claire. My name. Written 25 years earlier. I slowly lifted my eyes toward my parents. Neither of them would look at me. And in that moment, I realized the biggest lie in my life had just begun to unravel. I couldn't stop staring at the photograph. My fingers shook so badly that I almost dropped it onto the ruined birthday cake. There was no way it could be fake. The hospital bracelet on the baby's tiny wrist was visible. The date printed along the bottom matched my birthday. The woman in the bed wasn't my mother. She was younger than my mom had been in every baby picture I'd ever seen. And yet, she was looking at me with a kind of love that couldn't be staged. What is this? I whispered. No one answered. The ballroom was still crowded with relatives, co-workers, neighbors, and family friends, but the room suddenly felt empty. Every face was waiting. Every eye was on my parents. Dad pointed toward the exit. We're leaving. No. The word surprised even me. He stopped. I said we're leaving. I said no. It was the first time in my life I'd openly defied him in front of other people. His face turned crimson. Claire. No. I held up the photograph. Tell me who these people are. They're liars. What kind of lie includes a hospital photo with my name written on it? They forged it. They predicted my name 25 years ago. He opened his mouth. Nothing came out. For the first time, my father had no answer. Noah stepped beside me. We're done pretending this isn't happening. He looked directly at my parents. If you have an explanation, now's the time. Mom inhaled slowly. You don't understand? Then help me understand. She finally looked into my eyes. I had never seen her cry before. Not even when Grandma died. Not when she had surgery. Not at my college graduation. Now tears rolled down her cheeks. I was trying to protect you. From what? She looked at Dad. Dad looked away. That silence told me more than any confession could. The guests began leaving. Quietly. Embarrassed. Nobody wanted to be part of whatever this was becoming. My Aunt Karen approached me. She hugged me tightly. I'm so sorry. You knew. It wasn't a question. Her shoulders sagged. I found out years ago. My stomach twisted. Everyone knew. No. Who knew? She hesitated. Your parents. My grandmother. Your Uncle David. And me. For people had watched me grow up, had smiled through birthdays, Christmas mornings, graduations, knowing something that completely changed my life. How long? Almost 20 years. 20 years. I stepped backward. You all looked me in the eye. I wanted to tell you. But your father threatened to cut everyone off. There it was. Money. Control. Exactly how Dad handled every disagreement. Outside, rain had started falling. Noah drove us home in complete silence. Halfway there, he finally spoke. I've never been afraid of your dad. I looked out the window. But tonight, he wasn't angry. He was scared. I nodded. So scared he publicly disowned me instead of answering one question. Noah gripped the steering wheel tighter. I think those people know something that could destroy him. I didn't go home. Not to the house where I'd grown up. Instead, Noah took me to his apartment. Around 2 in the morning my phone rang. Ethan. My little brother. I almost ignored it. Instead, I answered. Neither of us spoke for several seconds. Finally he whispered. I'm sorry. What did you know? I didn't know everything. What does that mean? I only found out last month. My heart pounded. Tell me. I can't over the phone. Ethan. They'll know. Who? Another silence. Then, Dad checks my phone records. Even now, even after publicly throwing me away, he was still controlling everyone. Ethan, I found something. What? I think you need to see it. The next morning we met before sunrise. Not at a coffee shop. Not at home. At the city botanical gardens. Somewhere Dad would never think to look. Ethan looked exhausted. Dark circles covered his eyes. He handed me a small key. What's this? Grandma's storage unit. I frowned. Why would Grandma have a storage unit? Because Grandpa rented it after she died. And I found the paperwork hidden in his desk. He looked over his shoulder. I think she kept things there. What things? I don't know. He swallowed. But Dad tried really hard to stop me from finding it. The storage facility sat on the edge of town. Rows of identical gray doors stretched into the distance. Unit B, 117. The tiny key fit perfectly. When I rolled the metal door upward, dust filled the air. The room wasn't full of furniture. It was full of boxes. Every single one had my name written across the top. Claire. Box after box after box. My knees nearly gave out. Grandma had saved everything. School drawings, birthday cards, hospital paperwork, photo albums, letters, dozens, maybe hundreds of letters. None of them had ever been opened. Every envelope was addressed to me, in the same elegant handwriting. Claire Morgan, my birthday, my home address. One envelope caught my attention immediately. Across the front someone had written, "Give her this when she turns 18. I carefully opened it. Inside was a letter. The paper had yellowed with age. The signature at the bottom read, "Love always, Emma." Emma, the woman from the birthday party. I started reading. My sweetest Claire, if you're reading this, then someone finally did the right thing. I have imagined this day every birthday since you disappeared. I never stopped looking. I never stopped loving you. And I never gave up hoping you would learn the truth. The words blurred behind fresh tears. Disappeared. I kept reading. You were not abandoned. You were taken. I stopped breathing. No. No. That couldn't be what it sounded like. I forced myself to continue. Your father, Michael, was my older brother. When I was 19, I became pregnant. I wasn't married. Our parents were devastated but promised to help me raise you. 2 days after you were born, I woke up in the hospital. You were gone. My hands went numb. Michael told everyone you had died. I stared at the page. Dead. He told them. I was dead. The rest of the letter explained why she'd never stopped searching. There had been a funeral. A tiny white coffin. Closed. No one was allowed to open it. She begged, screamed, demanded to see her daughter. Michael refused. He said the doctors advised against it. Years later, she discovered there had never been a death certificate, no burial permit, no hospital record matching the story. By then, my parents had moved away, changed hospitals, changed churches, changed everything. Emma spent 25 years hiring investigators, searching adoption records, following rumors, until one private investigator connected an old hospital employee to my father's company. That single thread eventually led to me. No, I whispered. This can't be real. Noah gently took the letter. His face changed as he read. He looked up. Claire. What? I don't think this is about adoption. The words hung in the air. Neither of us wanted to say the obvious. If the letter was true, then the people I'd called Mom and Dad hadn't adopted me. They had stolen me. A noise echoed outside the storage unit. Footsteps. Someone was running. Ethan peeked around the corner. His face drained of color. They found us. What? Dad's SUV. Another vehicle pulled into the aisle. Then another. 3 black SUVs. Exactly like the ones from Dad's company. Doors opened. Men in business suits climbed out. Not security guards. Employees. People I'd known since childhood. One of them called out, Miss Morgan. Another smiled politely. Your father would like to speak with you. I folded Emma's letter and slipped it into my jacket. No. His smile disappeared. I'm afraid that wasn't a request. Noah stepped in front of me. I think we're leaving. The man sighed. I'd rather not do this. He reached for my arm. Before he touched me, a loud voice echoed across the storage yard. Take one more step. Everyone turned. 3 police cruisers had just entered through the front gate. Leading them was a silver-haired man from the birthday party. He wasn't smiling anymore. He simply stood beside a detective and pointed directly toward my father's employees. Then he looked at me. For the first time since all this began, I saw something besides grief in his eyes. Hope. Real hope. As the detective walked toward us, he said words that made my blood run cold. Miss Morgan, we need to ask you some questions. Your family may have been hiding a crime for 25 years. The detective didn't reach for handcuffs. He reached for a notebook. That terrified me even more. If this had been some ridiculous misunderstanding, someone would have laughed by now. Someone would have admitted the whole thing had gotten out of control. Instead, every adult standing around me looked like they were carrying pieces of the same nightmare. I'm Detective Laura Bennett, she said calmly. You're not in trouble. I looked at the silver-haired man. He gave me a small nod. We just need to know what you've learned since last night. I pulled Emma's letter from my jacket. I only know what's in here. The detective read the first page. Her expression didn't change, but I noticed the officer beside her exhale slowly. So, I asked, is any of this true? She closed the letter carefully. We don't know yet. That wasn't the answer I wanted. But we do know there are inconsistencies in the records surrounding your birth. An hour later we sat inside the police station. Noah refused to leave my side. The silver-haired man introduced himself properly. My name is Daniel. His voice was gentle. I'm Emma's father. I looked at him. So, you're my grandfather? He swallowed hard before answering. If everything we've uncovered is true. Yes. The word hit me harder than I expected. Grandfather. A man I'd never met had spent 25 years believing I died. Now he was sitting 3 feet away, trying not to cry. I kept your nursery exactly the way your mother left it, he said quietly. She wouldn't let us repaint it. My chest tightened. There was a little yellow rocking chair. He smiled sadly. You were supposed to learn to read in that chair. I covered my face. I'd spent years wondering why I always felt like something was missing. Maybe it wasn't my imagination after all. The detective returned, carrying an old cardboard archive box. This came from county records. Inside were photocopies of hospital documents, birth logs, admission forms, nursing schedules. She spread them across the table. Here's the problem. She pointed to one page. The nurse who supposedly signed your discharge wasn't working that day. Another page. The doctor who certified your death was attending a medical conference in another state. Another. There is no official death certificate. Daniel looked at the detective. So someone falsified the paperwork? We're considering that possibility. My heart raced. What about my birth certificate? She hesitated. Legally, it's valid. I frowned. How? Because a court approved it. My stomach dropped. A judge signed off? Yes. Then someone lied under oath. The room fell silent. Later that afternoon, Noah drove me to the house I'd grown up in. Not because I wanted to see my parents. Because I wanted answers. Dad opened the front door before I knocked. He looked exhausted. His tie was gone. His eyes were bloodshot. I wondered how long it would take. I stepped inside. This is your last chance. To do what? Tell me the truth. He laughed bitterly. You think strangers know your life better than I do? I think you've lied to me for 25 years. They poisoned you against us. No. I held up Emma's letter. You did. Mom appeared in the hallway. She looked smaller somehow, like she'd aged 10 years overnight. Claire. No. I raised my hand. One question. She nodded. Did you give birth to me? Her lips trembled. Slowly. She shook her head. I already knew the answer. But hearing it, it felt like the floor disappeared beneath me. Dad slammed his hand against the dining room table. It doesn't matter. I stared at him. It doesn't matter. We raised you. You stole my life. We saved your life. The room froze. Even Dad looked shocked by what he just said. I whispered, What does that mean? Mom burst into tears. He closed his eyes. For nearly a minute no one spoke. Finally he pulled out a chair. Sit down. I didn't want to, but I needed to hear whatever came next. You deserve the truth, he said quietly. I just don't think you'll forgive it. He rubbed his hands together. When Emma became pregnant, your grandparents were devastated. Daniel had told me that much. But that's not the whole story. He looked at Mom. Your biological father was dangerous. I frowned. What do you mean? He was violent. He sold drugs. He beat Emma. He threatened to take the baby. Mom finally spoke. She tried to leave him. He found out where she was staying. He came to the hospital. I listened without interrupting. The police removed him once, but he promised he'd come back. Dad leaned forward. My sister begged me to help. I blinked. So she knew. Yes. For one night. What? I was supposed to keep you until she was discharged. He looked like he hated every word. But when I saw him outside the hospital, I panicked. So you kept me? He nodded once. I thought I was protecting you. My voice cracked. For 25 years. He couldn't answer. Mom wiped away her tears. We wanted children. We'd been told we couldn't have any. When Michael brought you home, I fell in love with you instantly. I shook my head. So instead of giving me back, you became our daughter. No. I stood abruptly. I became your victim. Neither of them argued. Because they couldn't. Whatever fear had motivated them 25 years ago, every choice afterward had been theirs. Birthday after birthday. Christmas after Christmas. Every lie had been deliberate. I started walking upstairs. Dad called after me. What are you doing? I'm getting my things. The house is still yours. I stopped on the stairs. No. I looked back. It never was. My bedroom looked exactly the same. Except, someone had been inside recently. The closet doors were open. Several drawers were half empty, as if someone had searched the room. Noah noticed it too. Claire. What? He pointed beneath the bed. A small wooden box had been shoved against the wall. I'd never seen it before. Inside, there were newspaper clippings, all about missing infants, hospital security failures, custody disputes. One clipping had been folded separately. The headline read, Local man killed in hit and run after custody hearing. The photograph underneath showed a younger man with dark hair. His name was Ryan Carter. I frowned. Who's Ryan? Dad appeared in the doorway. His face went completely white. You weren't supposed to find that. I looked between the article and him. Who is he? No answer. Mom whispered. He was your biological father. I stared at the newspaper. He died. She nodded. 6 months after you disappeared. I looked back at Dad. You told me he was dangerous. He was. Did he ever try to find me? Another silence. Finally. Yes. How many times? He hired lawyers. He reported a kidnapping. He never stopped looking. The room spun. Everything I'd been told an hour earlier suddenly felt incomplete. A violent man could still love his child. Or maybe he wasn't violent at all. How could I know? Every fact I'd heard had come from people who had already admitted to lying. That evening I met Daniel and Emma at a quiet cafe. Emma looked terrified. Not of me. Of what I might think of her. I don't expect you to call me Mom. I haven't earned that. I reached across the table. You don't have to earn being honest. She smiled through tears. Then I placed the newspaper clipping in front of her. Tell me about Ryan. The color drained from her face. She closed her eyes. When she opened them again, they were filled with pain. He wasn't perfect. My heart sank. But he wasn't the monster you've been told. She took a deep breath. He made mistakes. He struggled. But he loved you before you were born. She looked directly into my eyes. And he died believing he'd failed to protect you. I felt tears sliding down my cheeks. Not because I knew who was telling the truth, but because I didn't. Every answer created 2 new questions. Every confession uncovered another lie. Then Daniel reached into his briefcase. I've been waiting to give you this. He handed me a worn leather journal. It's your grandmother's diary. I carefully opened the first page. Written in neat blue ink was a date. 2 days after my birth. The very first sentence made my pulse stop. Michael thinks nobody saw him take the baby. He doesn't know I followed him. I looked up at Daniel. He nodded slowly. Everything changes after that page. I didn't open my grandmother's diary right away. I just stared at it. The faded blue cover was cracked along the spine, and a pressed daisy peeked out from between the pages. Someone had loved this book enough to carry it everywhere. Someone had protected it for 25 years. Daniel looked at me carefully. You don't have to read it now. I do. Emma reached across the table and squeezed my hand. If it becomes too much, we'll stop. I nodded. Then I opened to the bookmark page. July 18th. Michael thinks nobody saw him take the baby. He doesn't know I followed him. My pulse quickened. I kept reading. I watched him leave the hospital, carrying Claire in a blue blanket. I thought he was taking her home because Emma was exhausted. Instead, he drove to the old cabin near Lake Mercer. Linda was already waiting. Linda, my mother. Or rather, the woman I'd always believed was my mother. The next entry was written the following morning. I confronted Michael. He said Ryan's family would eventually win custody. He said Emma would never escape Ryan. He said Claire would have a better life with him. I told him to take the baby back. He refused. I turned another page. The handwriting became shakier. Michael begged me to keep quiet for a few days. He said he'd fix everything. Instead, he reported the baby dead. I stopped reading. The cafe around me disappeared. For 25 years, my father hadn't been protecting me from a single bad decision. He'd been protecting himself from the consequences of his own choices. There are more entries, Daniel said softly. I forced myself to continue. The diary described argument after argument. My grandmother had threatened to go to the police. My father had threatened to cut off the family forever. My grandfather had wanted to tell the truth immediately. But then something unexpected happened. Ryan, my biological father, was arrested after a violent fight outside a bar. A month later, he was released. 2 months later, he filed for custody. 6 months later, he died in what police ruled a hit-and-run. Emma quietly wiped away tears. I never believed it was an accident. The detective, who had joined us after work, leaned forward. We've reopened that case. I looked up sharply. You think someone killed him? We're investigating every possibility. Over the next 2 weeks, my life became a blur of interviews. Detectives, lawyers, DNA testing, court records. Journalists camped outside Noah's apartment after someone leaked the story. The DNA results arrived on a rainy Thursday morning. The envelope felt impossibly heavy. Emma sat beside me. Daniel stood by the window. Noah wrapped an arm around my shoulders. I opened it. Probability of maternity, 99.9998%. Emma burst into tears before I did. She covered her face. I knew. I always knew. For the first time, I hugged her. Neither of us spoke. There weren't enough words. 25 years had been stolen. No conversation could give them back. That afternoon, Detective Bennett called. We found something. Her voice sounded different. Careful. Measured. We searched your parents' house with a warrant. What did you find? A locked safe. And there were letters. What kind of letters? They were written by your grandmother. My stomach tightened. They were never mailed. The letters all said the same thing. Confess. Tell Claire the truth. Bring her home before it's too late. Dad kept every single one. Hidden. Unread. Or perhaps, read too many times. A week later my father asked to meet. Alone. Against Noah's advice. I agreed. We met in the small public park where he taught me to ride a bicycle. The irony wasn't lost on either of us. He looked older than I remembered. Not because time had passed. Because guilt had finally caught him. I don't expect forgiveness. I sat silently. I've rehearsed this conversation 1,000 times. So have I. He nodded. I thought if I loved you enough, the truth wouldn't matter. I looked down at the worn wooden picnic table. You did love me. His eyes filled with tears. I still do. I know. That was the hardest part. This wasn't a story about parents who never cared. It was about parents who loved me and still made unforgivable choices. I tucked you in every night. I came to every soccer game. I celebrated every birthday. I was your dad. You were. The word caught in my throat. But you were also the man who took me away from my mother. He lowered his head. I know. I need to ask you one question. He looked up. If Grandma hadn't written that diary, would you ever have told me? He didn't answer immediately. Finally, no. The honesty hurt more than another lie, because it confirmed everything. The truth had never been coming. I had stumbled into it by accident. 3 months later, the district attorney announced criminal charges. Not for kidnapping. Too much time had passed under state law. But there were charges related to falsified records, fraud, obstruction, and conspiracy tied to the original cover-up. Some people were outraged. Others argued my parents had given me a wonderful life. The internet picked sides overnight. Half the comments called them monsters. The other half called them desperate people who made one terrible decision. I stopped reading all of it. Strangers didn't have to live with my memories. I did. One Sunday afternoon, Emma invited me to see the house where I'd been born. It sat on a quiet street lined with maple trees. The yellow paint had faded. The porch steps creaked. Inside, everything smelled faintly of cinnamon and old books. Daniel smiled. We never sold it. Emma led me upstairs. At the end of the hallway, she stopped before a white door. I couldn't change it. She opened it. There it was. The nursery. Yellow walls. A wooden rocking chair. Tiny stars painted across the ceiling. Exactly as Daniel had described. In one corner sat a stuffed rabbit with one floppy ear. Emma picked it up. I bought this while I was pregnant. She handed it to me. I hoped you'd still want it. I hugged the old toy against my chest. I do. As the months passed, our relationship grew slowly. Not like in movies. There wasn't an instant bond. There were awkward silences. Missed birthdays we couldn't celebrate. Stories we'd never shared. Sometimes we'd laugh over coffee. Other times we'd cry halfway through dinner because someone mentioned my childhood. Which childhood? The one I remembered? Or the one I never got to have? Eventually I realized something important. I didn't have to choose. Both were mine. My relationship with Ethan survived. In fact, it became stronger. He moved into an apartment closer to Noah and me. One evening he admitted something. I hated Dad for what he did. You don't have to hate him. I know. I just don't know how to love him the same way anymore. Neither did I. 6 months after my 25th birthday, Noah proposed. Not in a crowded restaurant. Not with cameras. We returned to the botanical gardens where Ethan had handed me the storage unit key. The place where my life had truly begun to change. He knelt beneath the same oak tree. I can't promise your future will be simple. I laughed through tears. I don't think simple is an option anymore. He smiled. I can promise you'll never face it alone. This time, when I said yes, it wasn't because I needed someone to rescue me. It was because I'd finally learned the difference between being chosen and being possessed. On the morning of our wedding, 2 women helped me get ready. Emma adjusted my veil. Linda, after months of counseling, apologies, and difficult conversations, stood quietly by the window. She hadn't expected an invitation. Honestly, neither had I. But healing isn't always about restoring what was broken. Sometimes it's about accepting that people are more complicated than the worst thing they've ever done. She approached carefully. You look beautiful. Thank you. I'm not asking you to call me Mom. I smiled sadly. I don't think I have to. She nodded, understanding exactly what I meant. There was room in my heart for gratitude, without pretending the past had never happened. Later that evening, after the reception ended, I slipped outside alone. The stars reflected across the lake. I thought about the little girl whose life had been rewritten before she could speak. The young woman who believed she belonged nowhere. The mother who never stopped searching. The father who loved too selfishly. The grandmother who refused to let the truth disappear. One diary. One photograph. One birthday. That was all it took to uncover 25 years of silence. People often ask me whether I wish I'd never learned the truth. The answer surprises them. The truth broke my heart. It shattered my family. It changed every childhood memory I had. But lies don't become love just because they're told for a long time. And families aren't defined only by blood or by the people who raise you. They're defined by the people willing to tell the truth, stand beside you when everything falls apart, and love you enough to let you choose your own future. On my 25th birthday, I thought I lost my family. What I actually lost was the lie, and only after losing that lie did I finally find my way home.